Right now, there are train engines rotting in scrapyards and locked inside storage buildings that once held speed records, terrified entire neighborhoods with their noise, and produced more horsepower than anything else on wheels. Engineers risked their careers betting on these machines. Railroads spent millions building them, and then the world just moved on and pretended they never existed. These are 10 vintage train engines that nobody talks about anymore, and their stories will blow your mind. Number 1. The Pennsylvania Railroad T1 Duplex. Let us start with one of the most controversial steam locomotives ever built. The Pennsylvania Railroad Class T1 was a duplex-drive locomotive with a 4-4-4-4-4 wheel arrangement. 2 prototypes were built by Baldwin Locomotive Works in 1942, and between 1945 and 1946, 50 production units followed, numbered 5500 through 5549. Now here is what made this locomotive special. Instead of having one set of driving wheels powered by a single pair of cylinders, the T1 split its driving wheels into 2 sets, each with its own pair of cylinders. This meant lighter rods, smaller pistons, reduced hammer blow on the track, and theoretically much smoother operation at high speed. The exterior was designed by the legendary industrial designer Raymond Loewy. The T1 had a distinctive shark-nosed, streamlined front end that looked like nothing else on the rails. It was sleek, it was aggressive, it looked fast, just standing still, and it was fast. A T1 could produce over 6,000 horsepower, and there were credible reports of T1s exceeding 100 miles per hour in regular service. At speeds above 26 miles per hour, a single T1 could actually outpull a 4-unit Electro-Motive FT diesel consist. That is an extraordinary claim, but the test data backed it up. So what went wrong? Wheel slip. The T1 was notoriously prone to spinning its wheels, both when starting and at speed. The Franklin poppet valve gear used on the production units was also temperamental. Engineers needed specialized training to operate the T1 properly, and many were never adequately trained for the transition from conventional locomotives. By 1948, the Pennsylvania Railroad made the decision to dieselize all express passenger trains. The brand new T1 fleet, some units barely 2 years old, was demoted to lesser duties. By 1953, every last T1 had been pulled from service. Every single one was scrapped. Not one was saved. But the story does not end there. In 2014, a non-profit called the Pennsylvania Railroad T1 Steam Locomotive Trust was formed with the goal of building a brand new T1 from scratch, numbered 5550. As of 2025, the frame is essentially complete and cylinder fabrication is well advanced. The project aims to have the locomotive finished by 2030. A locomotive that was born too late and died too soon may yet ride the rails again. Number 2. The Union Pacific Big Boy. If you want something massive, legendary, and almost lost forever, this is it. The Union Pacific Big Boy wasn't just a locomotive, it was the largest operational steam engine ever built. Constructed by American Locomotive Company between 1941 and 1944, only 25 of these monsters were ever made. They were designed for one purpose, hauling impossibly heavy freight over the brutal Wasatch Mountains between Utah and Wyoming. And when I say heavy, I mean trains weighing over 3,600 tons, pulled by a single locomotive. Each big boy stretched over 132 feet long, weighed more than 1.2 million pounds, and produced around 6,300 horsepower. It had a 4884 wheel arrangement, meaning 16 driving wheels powered by 2 sets of cylinders. But here's where it gets crazy. Despite its size, the big boy was incredibly fast for a freight locomotive. It could cruise at 60 miles per hour, something unheard of for engines this powerful. So why did something this legendary disappear? Because diesel locomotives arrived. By the late 1950s, railroads realized diesel engines were cheaper to maintain, easier to operate, more flexible, and just like that, the big boys were retired. By 1962, every single one was taken out of service. Most people assumed they were gone forever. But here's the twist that makes this story insane. Unlike many other locomotives on this list, they weren't all scrapped. 8 big boys survived. And in 2019, one of them, No. 4014, was fully restored to working condition by Union Pacific Railroad. After nearly 60 years of silence, the largest steam locomotive on Earth came back to life. Today, it runs excursion trips across the United States, shaking the ground, screaming with steam, and reminding everyone what real mechanical power looks like. A machine that should have been forgotten became a legend all over again. Number 3. The Norfolk and Western 2300, John Henry. If the C&O M1 was the first serious attempt at a steam turbine electric, the Norfolk and Western 2300 was the last. Built in 1954 by Baldwin Hamilton with a Babcock & Wilcox water tube boiler. This single experimental locomotive was given the nickname John Henry by its crew, after the legendary folk hero John Henry, who raced a steam drill and won, only to die from the effort. The nickname turned out to be tragically fitting. The Norfolk and Western was the last major American railroad fully committed to steam power. The railroad owned enormous coal reserves, giving it a nearly free fuel supply. It had built some of the finest steam locomotives ever designed, including the legendary Class J 484s and Class A 2664s, all designed and constructed in the railroad's own Roanoke shops. The N&W viewed diesels as an unnecessary expense. The John Henry was their attempt to prove that steam could still compete. It used a water tube boiler operating at 600 pounds per square inch, more than double the pressure of a conventional steam locomotive. The turbine drove generators that powered traction motors on 24 wheels across 4 3-axle trucks. It produced 4,500 horsepower and could generate 175,000 pounds of starting tractive effort. At 161 feet, including its tender, the John Henry was the longest steam locomotive ever built. It was so large that it could not fit on any of Norfolk and Western's turntables. The locomotive was tested in freight service, primarily working as a pusher on the heavy grades between Roanoke and Bluefield, Virginia. It could achieve fuel savings of up to 50% over the N&W's older Class Y locomotives at low speeds. But the Class A streamlined locomotives actually outperformed it at higher speeds by about 15%. Coal dust and water continued to infiltrate the traction motors, the same problem that had doomed the C&O's M1s. The controls were complex. Training engineers took excessive time. Maintenance costs were staggering. The John Henry was retired from the N&W roster on January 4, 1958, and scrapped in 1961. By the mid-1950s, even the proudly steam-loyal Norfolk and Western had placed its first order for diesel locomotives. GP9s from Electro-Motive began arriving in 1955. The railroad finally ceased all steam operations in May 1960, the last Class 1 railroad in the United States to do so. Number 4. The Baldwin RF-16 Sharknose. Not every forgotten engine was a radical experiment. Some were simply overshadowed by better marketed competitors. The Baldwin RF-16 is a perfect example. Built between 1950 and 1953, the RF-16 was a 1,600 horsepower diesel-electric freight locomotive with a BB wheel arrangement. It used Baldwin's 608A prime mover with an Elliott turbocharger. A total of 160 units were built for domestic railroads, split between 109 cab-equipped A units and 51 cables booster B units. What made the RF-16 distinctive was its Sharknose car body. In 1948, Baldwin had contracted the design firm Hadley, Ryder and Pedersen to create a new look for its cab unit diesels. The result was directly inspired by the streamlined nose of the Pennsylvania Railroad's T1 steam locomotive. The angular, forward-thrusting nose was dramatic, aggressive, and unlike anything EMD or Alco was offering. The RF-16 earned a strong reputation as a heavy hauler. Its Westinghouse traction motors gave it exceptional lugging power, producing a continuous tractive effort between 42,200 and 52,500 pounds, more than either EMD's F7 or Alco's FA2. It became a favorite for dragging heavy coal trains through Appalachian mountain grades. The Pennsylvania Railroad was the largest buyer, purchasing units for both freight and passenger duties. The Baltimore and Ohio and New York Central also operated significant fleets. But the RF-16 had one critical problem. It used an air-powered throttle, meaning it could not be run in multiple unit operation with EMD or Alco locomotives without special equipment. As railroads increasingly mixed motive power from different builders in the same consistence, this incompatibility became a serious handicap. Baldwin was also still building locomotives one at a time, like steam engines. Each unit was slightly different in wiring and component placement, making maintenance a frustrating guessing game for shop crews accustomed to the cookie-cutter consistency of EMD products. The B&O retired its Sharknoses as a class in 1962. The Pennsylvania Railroad followed in 1966. The Monongahela Railway picked up some surviving New York Central units in 1967 and ran them until the mid-1970s. The last two operating RF-16s, numbers 125 and 11216s, were traded to the Delaware and Hudson Railway, where they ran in freight and excursion service until 1978. Today, just two RF-16A units survive, stored at the Escanaba and Lake Superior Railroad in Michigan. The railroad's owner has stated they will eventually be donated to a museum, but for now, they sit locked away from public view. Number 5. The Alco PA. If you asked a rail fan to name the most beautiful diesel locomotive ever built, there is a good chance they would say the Alco PA. Designed by General Electric's Ray Patton, the PA had a long, muscular body, a distinctive grille-framed headlight, and an elegantly tapered nose that made it look like it was doing 90 miles per hour while standing still. The PA was a passenger diesel built by the American Locomotive Company in partnership with General Electric. The PA-1 model, producing 2,000 horsepower, was built between 1946 and 1950. The improved PA-2 at 2,250 horsepower followed from 1950 to 1953. In total, 297 PA and PB cableless booster units were constructed. Major railroads jumped at the PA. The Santa Fe ordered them for its legendary Warbonnet liveried passenger trains. The Pennsylvania Railroad used them on the Broadway Limited. The New York Central, Southern Pacific, Union Pacific, and a dozen other lines bought them for their premier services. But under that gorgeous skin lurked a deeply flawed engine. The Alco Model T44 diesel prime mover was rushed into production. Senior management at Alco had demanded the engine be ready by the end of 1946, and it simply was not adequately tested for heavy mainline service. In marine and switcher applications, the T44 worked well enough. In the demanding environment of high-speed passenger service, it suffered frequent breakdowns. Maintenance costs soared. Railroads that ran both PAs and EMD units quickly discovered that the EMDs were far more reliable. When the PA came up for heavy overhaul, the scope of work and cost required often led mechanical departments to simply park the units and buy more EMDs instead. By the late 1950s and early 1960s, most PAs were being scrapped or converted to other uses. A few Santa Fe PA-1s were sold to the Delaware and Hudson in 1967, where they were rebuilt as PA-4s with Alco's much more reliable 251 engine. Those 4 units eventually went to Mexico in 1978, where they served until being damaged and retired. Out of 297 units built, only a handful survive today. One, cosmetically restored as nickel plate road number 190, was mechanically rebuilt over a period of roughly 20 years by preservationist Doyle McCormack. In 2023, it was sold to Genesee Valley Transportation in Pennsylvania, where it was restored to full operation and led its first passenger excursion in the summer of 2025, nearly half a century after a PA had last pulled a passenger train in the United States. Number 6. The Union Pacific gas turbine electric locomotives. Now we come to something truly insane. The Union Pacific gas turbine electric locomotives, known as GTELs, were essentially jet engines on rails. They were the most powerful single-unit locomotives ever operated by any American railroad, and they were so loud that entire cities banned them. The story began in 1948. When Alco GE built a prototype gas turbine locomotive for the Union Pacific. The concept was straightforward. Instead of a diesel engine driving a generator, a gas turbine, essentially a modified jet engine, would do the same job. The turbine turned a generator, the generator produced electricity, and traction motors drove the wheels. Union Pacific loved the idea and eventually operated a fleet of 55 gas turbines delivered in 3 generations between 1952 and 1961. The first generation produced 4,500 horsepower per unit and resembled an oversized Alco PA diesel. The second generation, nicknamed verandas for the walkways along their sides, also produced 4,500 horsepower. But the third generation was something else entirely. The third generation GTELs, built between 1958 and 1961, consisted of 2 locomotive units plus a massive fuel tender. They were rated at 8,500 horsepower, though they were capable of producing over 10,000. Each 3-unit set stretched nearly 166 feet long. They quickly earned the nickname Big Blows because of their deafening turbine noise. You could hear one coming from miles away, and when it passed, you felt it in your chest. The GTELs ran primarily between Council Bluffs, Iowa and Ogden, Utah, hauling heavy freight through the plains of Wyoming. At their peak, Union Pacific estimated that the gas turbines were hauling more than 10% of the railroad's total freight. The key to their economics was fuel. The turbines burned Bunker C heavy fuel oil, a residual petroleum product with the consistency of tar at room temperature. Bunker C was incredibly cheap in the 1950s because refiners had few other uses for it. The fuel had to be heated to 200 degrees Fahrenheit before it could flow into the turbine, but even with that extra handling, operating costs were remarkably low. Then 2 things happened. First, the petrochemical industry discovered that Bunker C could be refined further into plastics and lighter fuels. The price began climbing. Second, the corrosive ash in the heavy fuel oil eroded the turbine blades, requiring expensive overhauls. As fuel costs rose and maintenance costs followed, the GTELs went from economical to unsustainable. There was also the noise problem. When Union Pacific tried running GTELs to Los Angeles in 1962, residents of Southern California suburbs lodged massive numbers of complaints. The turbines were essentially banned from major urban areas. By the late 1960s, the writing was on the wall. The last 2 GTELs, numbers 18 and 26, were stored in operating condition at the Cheyenne Roundhouse until being officially retired in February 1970. Today, only 2 survive. Number 18 is at the Illinois Railway Museum, and number 26 is at Ogden Union Station in Utah. Number 7. The Baldwin Centipede. The Baldwin Centipede might be the most unique diesel-electric locomotive concept ever developed. Officially designated DR-12-8-1500 SU, meaning diesel road, 12 axles, 8 powered, with 2 and a 1,500 horsepower engines, the Centipede earned its nickname from its extraordinary number of wheels, which ran in a nearly unbroken line beneath the locomotive, resembling the legs of its namesake insect. Built between December 1945 and July 1948, the Centipede carried a 2D plus D2 wheel arrangement more commonly associated with electric locomotives. It rode on 2 massive articulated cast steel half frames linked by a hinged joint at the center, with unpowered 4-wheel guide trucks at each end. The Centipede was born from practical necessity. In 1945, after years of deferred maintenance during World War II, many American railroads had rights-of-way in terrible condition. The rough track made for brutally uncomfortable rides in conventional 4-axle and 6-axle diesels. The Centipede's 12-axle design spread its weight across a much larger area, resulting in a remarkably smooth ride even on deteriorated track. 3 railroads bought them. The Pennsylvania Railroad ordered 24 units, typically running them in semi-permanently coupled pairs. The Seaboard Airline Railroad ordered 14 units. Ferrocarriles Nacionales de Mexico ordered 14. A total of 54 production units were built. The PRR initially used its Centipedes on premium passenger trains, where they could hit 100 miles per hour. The units produced 3,000 horsepower each, meaning a coupled pair delivered 6,000 horsepower, matching a 3-unit EMD consist with only 2 units. But Baldwin's manufacturing philosophy sabotaged the Centipede's potential. Baldwin was still building diesels the way it had built steam locomotives, one at a time. No 2 Centipedes were exactly alike. Wiring ran through metal conduits identical to those used on steam locomotives. Component placement varied from unit to unit. A mechanic who had just finished working on one centipede might find the next one laid out completely differently. The PRR's maintenance crews reportedly disliked the centipedes from the moment they arrived. The locomotives were derated and shoved into helper and freight service. Seaboard's units fared somewhat better, especially after being upgraded with improved engine components, but were still retired by 9. Mexico's centipedes actually lasted the longest, with some surviving into the early 1970s thanks to extensive rebuilding. Today, not a single centipede survives. All 54 were scrapped. Number 8. The Fairbanks-Morse Erie-built. The Fairbanks-Morse Erie-built was one of the most elegant diesel locomotives ever designed, and one of the most thoroughly forgotten. Its car body was styled by none other than Raymond Loewy, the same designer who shaped the Pennsylvania Railroad T1, the GG1 Electric, and dozens of other iconic machines. The Erie-built was Fairbanks-Morse's first attempt at a full-size streamlined road locomotive. It produced 2,000 horsepower from a 10-cylinder opposed piston diesel engine, the same type of engine that had powered American submarines during World War II with great success. The name came from the fact that Fairbanks-Morse did not have enough space at its factory in Beloit, Wisconsin, to build large road locomotives. So assembly was subcontracted to General Electric's plant in Erie, Pennsylvania, and the Erie-built name stuck. A total of 82 cab-equipped A units and 29 cables B units were manufactured between December 1945 and February 1949, selling to 7 railroads. The Pennsylvania Railroad was by far the largest customer with 48 units. Other buyers included the Santa Fe, Milwaukee Road, Union Pacific, New York Central, Kansas City Southern, and Chicago and Northwestern. The Erie-built's opposed piston engine was a marvel of compact power, because each cylinder had 2 pistons moving toward each other rather than the conventional single piston. The engine produced tremendous power from a compact package. A 3-unit Erie-built consist could deliver 6,000 horsepower, matching what it took 4 EMD FT units to produce. But the opposed piston engine that worked so well in submarines turned out to be troublesome on land. On a submarine, the engine had access to cool sea-level air and seawater for cooling. On Western railroads, the engines were operating at high altitude, in extreme heat, and often in the hot exhaust wake of leading locomotives. The engines also required extensive disassembly for even minor maintenance. Replacing a single-cylinder liner and its pistons required removing the locomotive's roof hatch, upper crankcase, and upper crankshaft. Railroad shop foremen, under pressure to return as many locomotives to service as possible, naturally prioritized EMD units that could be repaired quickly over Erie-builts that required days of labor. Several railroads eventually gave up and repowered their Erie-builts with EMD 567 engines. The most famous Erie-builts were probably those operated by the Milwaukee Road on the Olympian Hiawatha between Chicago and the Pacific Northwest. Adorned in the railroad's stunning orange and maroon livery with chrome accents, they were among the most visually striking diesel locomotives ever to turn a wheel. Today, not a single Erie-built survives. All 111 units were scrapped. The only known physical remnant is a pilot truck that ended up beneath the restored Alco PA No. 190. Number 9. The Pennsylvania Railroad, S1. Before the T1, there was an even more extreme duplex locomotive on the Pennsylvania Railroad, the S1, nicknamed the Big Engine. There was only one, numbered 6100, and it was completed at the PRR's Altoona shops on January 31, 1939. But it remained in active service into the early 1940s, making it very much a product of its era. The S1 carried a unique 6-4-4-6 wheel arrangement, meaning 6 unpowered leading wheels, 2 sets of 4 driving wheels each powered by their own pair of cylinders, and 6 trailing wheels. Its exterior was streamlined by Raymond Loewy in a dramatic Art Deco style that became one of the most famous locomotive images of the 20th century. At 140 feet and 2.5 inches long, including its tender, the S1 was the longest reciprocating steam locomotive ever built. It weighed 1,060,000 pounds. It had the heaviest tender ever attached to any locomotive at 451,840 pounds and the highest tractive effort of any passenger steam engine at the time of its construction at 76,403 pounds. Its driving wheels were 7 feet in diameter. The S1 was designed to haul a 1,200-ton passenger train at a sustained 100 miles per hour on level track. During testing, it achieved 100.97 miles per hour while pulling a 1,350-ton train on level track. In one pre-service road test, it was clocked at 73 miles per hour, pulling 90 freight cars. The S1 was first displayed at the 1939 New York World's Fair, where it was exhibited not under the Pennsylvania Railroad's name, but under the banner American Railroads, as part of a combined exhibit representing 27 Eastern railroads. After the fair, the S1 entered service, but its enormous size created problems. It was simply too large to operate over most of the PRR's system. It was restricted to the 283-mile stretch between Chicago and Crestline, Ohio. Even there, it proved prone to wheel slip, a problem that would later plague the production T1 fleet as well. By 1946, the Pennsylvania Railroad's financial situation was deteriorating. President Martin Clement announced that all through passenger trains west of the electrified territory would be dieselized by May 1948. Preservation of the S1 was discussed within the PRR's board, but the railroad's worsening finances made it impossible to justify. The S1 was scrapped in 1949. Number 10. The Fairbanks-Morse Trainmaster. We end with a locomotive that was not a failure of engineering. It was a failure of timing. The Fairbanks-Morse H2466, universally known as the Trainmaster, was arguably the most revolutionary diesel locomotive of the 1950s, and yet it sold in tiny numbers and was abandoned by an industry that simply was not ready for it. Introduced in 1953, the Trainmaster was a massive 6-axle CC road switcher producing 2,400 horsepower from Fairbanks-Morse's 12-cylinder opposed piston engine. To put that in context, the most powerful single-unit diesel locomotives of the early 1900s, like EMD's GP7 and GP9, produced 500 to 1,750 horsepower. The Trainmaster had 40 to 60% more power than anything else on the market. It was physically larger than any other road switcher diesel of its time. It could out-accelerate anything on rails. A single Trainmaster could replace 2 conventional road switchers on heavy assignments. It was designed to handle both mainline road hauls and heavy switching, making it extraordinarily versatile. Several railroads recognized its potential. The Virginian Railway used Trainmasters in heavy coal service on the steep Appalachian grades. The Reading Railroad and the Central Railroad of New Jersey used them on commuter runs, where their quick acceleration was perfect for the stop-and-start demands of suburban service. The Southern Pacific Pennsylvania Railroad and Canadian Pacific also purchased units. But only 127 Trainmasters were ever built before production ended in 19... Why so few? The railroad industry in the 1950s was deeply conservative about motive power. Mechanical departments were standardized around 4-axle locomotives from EMD. Maintenance manuals, spare parts inventories, and training programs were all built around 4-axle BB designs. The Trainmaster's 6-axle layout and opposed piston engine required entirely different maintenance protocols. The engine's reputation for high maintenance demands, inherited from the troubles of the Erie-built and other Fairbanks-Morse models, made purchasing agents hesitant. It would take nearly 20 years for the railroad industry to fully embrace the high horsepower 6-axle concept that the Trainmaster had pioneered. When EMD introduced the SD42 in 1972, it was producing 3,000 horsepower on a 6-axle platform and became the most successful locomotive model in American history. It was, in many ways, the locomotive the Trainmaster had predicted. Most Trainmasters were retired by the mid-1960s, although a few lasted into the 1970s on commuter lines and short lines. A handful survive in preservation, but the Trainmaster remains one of the least remembered locomotives of its era, despite being the machine that pointed the way forward for an entire industry. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment telling me which of these forgotten engines fascinated you the most. I will see you in the next one.